guys, we're talking about this 1997 S320, the Mercedes Benz flagship. This car was and is the top of the line for Mercedes Benz. If you drive one of these things, you're an important dude. You are an attorney, you're an accountant, you're some big politician. This car went for about $65,000 back in the day in 1997, 23 years ago. I bought it for $1,250 about 6 months ago from a guy here in Harrisburg. I just think it's gorgeous. Look at this thing. It's 19 feet long. And by the way, this is the short wheelbase. They make a longer version of this. It's a mini limousine at that point. These engines are indestructible. It's an inline 6-cylinder. Doesn't have a lot of power, but I'll tell you what, it pulls its weight well. It weighs 4,475 pounds. That's 2 tons plus some. But what we'll do today is take this thing out on the road, show you some of the things that make it unique, how it stood the test of time. I really hope that this is kind of the first of many videos to kind of show you all what I enjoy about cars and what I know so many of you as enthusiasts enjoy about cars as well. So let's get going. Okay, so the inside of this car is still so amazingly well equipped, even for 23 years old. One of the really cool things about this car that I don't think anyone really knows about or even uses is this one button right here. It's called, or it's labeled REST. That essentially is a heat reservoir that when you turn the car off, it'll actually blow hot, warm air for a couple of minutes with the car completely turned off. You take the key out, you push this button, it'll blow hot air at you. And my keys, they're down there on the floor. If you don't want your car idling, if you don't want your car to be on while you're waiting for someone to come out of the store, or maybe you're stopping for 5 minutes at someone's house outside, it's there, it's an option. All of the window switches, I call this the Saab effect. If you've ever been inside a Saab, all of their buttons and all their window controls are in the center console, right down by the gear shifter. And that's the case for this Mercedes Benz S320 as well. But it does have dual folding power mirrors. You just turn this button around and switch it on back, and the mirrors do fold in so that if you're on those tight German streets or if you're in any kind of tight spot, your mirrors are tucked in. And there's also a couple of switches here, the S and W. The S and W, S is standard driving, your everyday normal driving, and W is weather. That basically means it changes the gears and just the way the car is going to run for you. Another really cool button here, just because of the little graphic that's on it, is the little kid. These are for the back windows. And also up here at the top, we've got these 4 buttons. You've got the hazard lights, you've got your locking, you've got the back headrest, and you've got the trunk. When you push the trunk, you know what happens there. Whenever you push the trunk button and the trunk is left open, that light stays illuminated, kind of telling you, hey, by the way, your trunk is open, don't drive away. When you push the headrests, the back headrests on the back deck behind the passengers, they go down. That helps with improving and increasing visibility for the driver. Down here at the bottom though, you've got one of these, it's called ASR, it's the anti-slip reduction. There'll be a nice triangle on the dashboard that lights up, meaning that it's not activated. So if you ever bump that and you think, oh, I've got a warning light, push that ASR button and actually it'll take that traffic light away from you and you'll be good to go. One of the other really cool things that I love about this car is that it's very ergonomical. It's simple, yet elegant, which I find to be fascinating because so many cars try to do that and they miss the mark. This car kind of drives on the point of, we know what we're doing and you're gonna like it. Up at the top here too, you've got every kind of vent control you could ever want. You've got each one of these different rotator wheels, I guess you could call them. You've got one for each center vent, you've got one on each side then. And one of the other really cool things in this S320 are these buttons in the center here. There's a red button and a blue button. Essentially, do you want hot or cold air blowing out at you? Which, I don't know why you'd have to have a button for that when you've got the controls down here with your dual zone climate controls and your auto climate controls. I'm not really sure what the point of them are, but Mercedes gives it to you. One of the cooler things I think too, especially in a car that's 23 years old, is that this steering wheel is electronically controlled in and out, up and down. How many cars, A, had this option, and 23 years later, how many of them still work? The Mercedes Benz S320, in particular, this one. Another really cool option, which I know is just a quintessential Mercedes thing, watch that, ready? Oh, it goes up and down. Another interesting fact and trivia for you, the Mercedes Benz 1997 S320 debuted these side impact airbags for the first time. They debuted in this model. 23 years ago, it was not really standard to have side impact airbags on cars. One thing that I find really is kind of underappreciated in any Mercedes Benz are the options they give you for your seats. But look at that closely. There's two sections there. You push the top part and only the bottom cushion moves. Just the bottom cushion, not the whole seat. You push the bottom one as a whole, and guess what? The whole seat moves forward. It's kind of fun. Just over the brushed aluminum side lip here is your inflatable lower lumbar support. It's actually kind of a big bag, I guess, is what it is. And whenever you scroll this wheel, it makes the lower part of that inflate or deflate, depending on what you want. And one of the final quirks I want to talk about is look at this in between the seats. You may not think it's anything if you're not looking close enough, but that actually is a guard to prevent any kind of trash, any kind of crumbs from falling down underneath your seat. Both sides have this. And on the higher model S classes of this year, I guess, this right here is where the integrated phone would be hidden and stored. This is just a storage space on this S320 since it doesn't have that phone option, but it does, look at this. It does have the microphone that you would need to talk out loud on the phone. The phone itself, by the way, would be in this center console here, right in this space. Looks just like a phone, doesn't it? Instead, you get these two very crappy, very modest, I guess, cup holders that don't hold anything today. I think cups from McDonald's and places were a lot smaller back then, so maybe it held those. I've had drinks spill over in this car in just the 6 months I've owned this thing. They're just so shallow. They don't do anything. And also, when you got that open, you got to have that open too. You got to keep that open. Look, your elbow, it hits up against it. It's one of the poorest designs I've ever seen as far as a luxury car goes. But this also flips the entire way up, revealing even more storage. I've got a little trash bag down there, but this slides up and down, closes it up. It's about a foot deep, actually, so it goes down pretty far. And here we are in the back seat of this thing. If you're lucky enough to have one of these and get chauffeured around, you spend a lot of time here in the back seat. I'm unfortunately not one of those people. I drive myself around, as do probably many of you. Either way, this car's still a fun thing to drive and experience in the back seat. It's definitely extremely comfortable. These seats have really stood up well over 23 years. They're perforated leather in the back, as are the front seats. They kind of look like they might be ventilated or like air conditioned controlled or something in those newer cars. This, unfortunately, is not one of those. In the back seat of the S500s, these benches actually slide up and down and recline. They've got controls in the door by the window switch. This car, the S320, does not have that. These are just your standard rear seats. You got your center armrest, I guess you could call it, with, guess what, even more modest and ridiculously stupid and shallow cup holders. I guess people back in the 1990s didn't drink on the road, and I mean drink like, you know, soda or water or whatever, a Gatorade, because look how small these things are. These would hold a pudding cup and it'd fall out. The armrest is awesome, folds up, it gives you an extra room for 3 people here. It does kind of suck to have this center hump in the back, but I mean, that was kind of a standard thing back then. You do have rear ventilation, airflow control, but it's not terribly advanced. It's just kind of your basic vents that are there. Not many cars had that back then, but you know, you've got that option if you want to. Another thing that we got up here are these vanity mirrors. Each side, they're built right up into the car, into the roof. And by the way, the roof is very, very soft and kind of like velour feeling. And it's no secret, Mercedes-Benz makes huge cars, and this is definitely one of them. Watch whenever we open up this thing. This almost opens up to a 90-degree angle. It's got massive openings. I mean, that's almost a 90-degree angle opening up for easier access inside that car. It's not totally straight out, but look, it nearly is. And for that reason, these hinges on these doors break a lot. This one here, as you can see, is from a white car. I got this out of a junkyard and installed this myself. These doors stop at different intervals and they just go for forever. Let's go under the hood right now. Yeah, and like I said before, not much to get excited about speed-wise. Mercedes makes quick, fast, amazingly luxurious. This is just half of that. This is just a luxury car. This has a 228 horsepower inline 6-cylinder engine, no turbo, no fun, earthy, dream, green, feel, leafy name. these car companies give their engines nowadays. This is just brute, raw German engineering. This thing gets about 17 city, 24 miles per gallon highway, which sounds pretty decent, actually, and it is pretty decent. The only bad news is it's a 26-gallon tank, which means it takes like 75 plus bucks to fill up because you got to put premium in it. No turbo, as I mentioned. It's not quick off the line at all. It's got some nice cruising merging speed once you get up into the higher RPMs, but this thing really, other than that, is meant to take you places in style, not necessarily get you there quick, but it doesn't matter. Just look at this engine. It's so clean. I've not cleaned this either, and I would probably venture to say the people before me who own this didn't clean it either. I just have to show you how clean this engine is from the top too. Look, all around, I promise you, I've not cleaned this thing. It just makes you want to figure out how'd they do it. This thing was built to perform, and perform it does. Another really cool option this Mercedes-Benz had back in 1997 was their soft close door option. Essentially, if you close the door almost the whole way, a vacuum would pull the door the rest of the way shut. Unfortunately, after 23 years, my car doesn't work anymore unless you reset the system. By resetting the system, you got to pull the fuse out of the fuse box for about a minute or two. So in the trunk, in this back fuse box, take out I think it's number 9 over here. Yep, this one. And then it'll work for the next maybe half a day, and then the system kicks out once more. And see how on my car this is sticking up higher than it should be? Look, I can actually push this down. Yeah, that's because the pump system also pulls the trunk down closed with the soft close option, but you guessed it, that's also broken on my car. You got to reset that as well. And the trunk is not leaking or anything. It just looks kind of odd, and you shouldn't be able to do that on a car like this. This car is so over-engineered, things break and then things kind of don't look right, and that's kind of the case with this.
There's another nifty feature here at the back of the car. Whenever you push the keyhole button, a handle magically appears. It's there so closing the trunk is easier. Then when you do close it, that handle is sucked back up out of view. At the front, mini wipers spray and clean the headlights whenever you spray your windshield. And speaking of the windshield, this car senses the intensity of the rain and adjusts its speed accordingly. And look at this, there's an extender feature that goes up and down that lets these wipers reach more of the windshield, increasing visibility. And take a look at that, these wipers wipe in the opposite direction of almost all other cars on the road, from the driver's side to the passenger side. That's kind of backwards. Another Benz oddity.
So here we are behind the wheel. This thing, as I've said before, is a behemoth. It's 4,475 pounds. What I find most fun about driving this car is that it really soaks up every bump you go over. Here's a bump. That was a rather large bump. You can't really tell, but you barely felt it. I'm not sure what the camera did, but this thing really soaks up any kind of imperfection in the roadway. It is huge, but it also takes in all of the little bumps, all the little things you expect out of a car of this size, of this price range. It isn't a car that's going to get you off the line super fast. It's not going to get you there really, really quick if acceleration and 0 to 60 is your thing. But this car really does pull and give you that nice German hum whenever you get up off of the starting line. Back in the day, luxury sedans really weren't concerned with also being fast. They just wanted to get you there in style. They just wanted to be luxurious. They just wanted to have the nice material, the great sound system, the amazing amenities. And that's what this car has. Speed was almost an afterthought. It's got a great, strong, powerful engine, but it's not a quick car. And this car really kind of does shine cruising out on the highway, which is where we are headed right now. Emerging power is rather decent. And what you'll also notice too in this car, if you ever have one or drive one, is how insanely quiet it is. We're going 80 miles an hour, and I know in my newer car that I have, you can hear the wind at 50, 60 miles an hour. This thing is supremely quiet. It's one of the best things about this car that I love. If you open up the doors, which I've done before, there's just padding for days. The sound dampening in each of the doors and around all of the pillars is just phenomenal. Another reason this Mercedes is so quiet is look at this. It has double pane glass on every single window. Right now we are out doing what the Germans intended this car to do. This thing is a cruiser. We are going, 65 miles an hour now, and it floats down the highway. It's like a lazy boy on wheels. You kind of just do one of these over bumps, which I find just so fun, because in newer cars, you kind of hit the bump and you go for a teeny ride for a second and then you're all done. Speaking of how fun this car is, you can have fun and still get decent gas mileage. You get like 18, 19 city and 24, 25 highway, which for a car that weighs more than 2 tons isn't bad, but this thing really does get you 400 some miles to a tank if you're driving it under regular conditions. And I've always said too, I'm such a car fanatic that I can't imagine buying a car like this, or having a car like this at your disposal and wanting to sit in the back. This thing is just too fun to drive. It cruises like a dream. And this thing, again, is 23 years old and I bought for really cheap. So if you bought one in perfect condition, I can only imagine what that thing is capable of. Another cool thing about this car is the turning radius is insanely small for a car of this size. I keep mentioning my new car. I have a 2018 Honda Accord Sport with huge rims. It has a horrendous turning radius. I have to do 18-point turns everywhere I go. The steering is rather tight for a car of this size, and everything is just smooth. It is a solid car. So that is it for this review of the 1997 Mercedes Benz S320. I hope you enjoyed it. I tried to point out all the cool things that I love and find really kind of odd about this car, and I hope to do some more in the future. So make sure to subscribe and follow, and check back for regular updates about the new latest car I'm reviewing.